My cowlick. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland, wherever you are around the world, on another universe. I am your sensei, your griot of Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. And I, he, you or she, and we are all together. So, how's you doing, right? It's a kind of interesting world we're living in these days. And I've been looking at the old YouTube, and let's start out with. Let's start out with. What are we going to start out with? Let's try a few phone calls. Okay. Do. Let's go to Kev. See what he answers the phone. Anthony. Tony. Anyone call you Tony? Anthony. I will never call you Anthony.
Hi, we're not home right now. Please leave them. Allison and Kevin.
Please enter your PIN followed by the pound key. To leave a message for this subscriber, press the pound key. To log on as another subscriber.
Hi, we're not home right now. Please leave a message and we'll give you a call back as soon as we can. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.
At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, simply hang up or press pound for further options.
Hey, Kev, give me a call. I'm on the live chat. Love to have you join us. Talk to you later. We're still iced in here. It's still Ice Station Zebra. It's 26 degrees. So that's where I'm at. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. I'll talk to you also. After I do the live chat, if you don't want to be on live chat, that's cool. But you would add so much. Your intellectual prowess would be appreciated. Okie dokie. Okay, so who else? Let's see. Oh, let's try Petey. See if he picks up. He hasn't been picking up at all. Yeah, who's trying to call those guys? Oh, let's play a little YouTube. Okay, we'll go right into this one.
And federal prosecutors continue investigation into last year's deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol.
Oh, it's so deadly.
And Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the election. We turn to look at a largely forgotten effort to topple the U.S. government in the past. It was 1934. Some of the nation's most powerful bankers and business leaders plotted to overthrow President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in order to block the New Deal and establish a fascist dictatorship. The coup plotters included the head of General Motors, Alfred P. Sloan, as well as J.P. Morgan Jr. and the former president of DuPont, Irene DuPont. The men asked the celebrated Marine Corps officer, Smedley Butler, to lead a military coup. But Butler refused and revealed what he knew. to members of Congress. This is a clip of General Smedley Butler speaking in 1934.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans.
You're snidely.
To use as a bluff or as a club at least to intimidate the government and break down our democratic institutions. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over functions of government. I talked with an investigator for this committee who came to me with a subpoena on Sunday, November 18th. He told me they had unearthed evidence linking my name with several such veteran organizations. As it then seemed to me to be getting serious, I felt it was my duty to tell all I knew of such activities to this committee. My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institutions. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech, and press.
At the time, Marine Major General Smedley Butler was one of the most celebrated Marine officers in the country, having played key roles in U.S. invasions and occupations across the globe, including in Cuba, Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, Haiti, Mexico, and the Philippines. But Smedley Butler later spoke out against U.S. imperialism, famously writing, "War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many," Butler said. We're joined now by the award-winning author Jonathan Katz, author of the new book Gangsters of Capitalism, Smedley Butler, the Marines, and the Making and Breaking of America's Empire. Also the author of The Big Truck That Went By, How the World Came to Save Haiti and Left Behind a Disaster. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Jonathan. This is a fascinating book. I mean, for people who don't know about, for example, this attempted coup of 1934, can you talk more about exactly how it unfolded? The parallels to these days are quite interesting, but let's start with the original story that took place, like 90 years ago?
Yeah, so it actually starts in 1933. A representative of a prominent Wall Street brokerage house named Gerald C. McGuire starts trying to recruit Smedley Butler it actually starts out as a kind of an internal plot to get him to speak against Franklin D. Roosevelt taking the dollar off the gold standard at an American Legion conference in Chicago, but it broadens from there. And by 1934, McGuire is sending Butler postcards from the French Riviera, where he's just arrived from fascist Italy, from Berlin, and then he comes to Butler's hometown of Philadelphia and asks him to lead a column of 500,000 World War I veterans up Pennsylvania Avenue for the purpose of intimidating Franklin Delano Roosevelt into either resigning outright or handing off all his executive powers to a all-powerful, unelected cabinet secretary who the plotters who are backing McGuire were going to name.
And Jonathan, didn't Butler also claim, in addition to these corporate leaders, that there were folks like Prescott Bush involved in this, the father of George Herbert Walker Bush and grandfather of George W. Bush?
So there's actually a kind of a game of broken telephone going on with his name being involved in this. So Prescott Bush was actually too much involved with the actual Nazi party in Germany to be involved with the business plot. He was Bush was a partner at Brown Brothers Harriman, which is still a major investment bank based in New York, across the street from Zuccotti Park, their headquarters. And Bush was Brown Brothers Harriman was the subject of a different investigation.
That's where
by the
Occupy
same
started in
congressional
that park.
committee, because that committee's ambit was to investigate all forms of sort of fascist influence and all attempts to, subvert American democracy. And because Brown Brothers was part of a separate investigation, they end up sort of in the same folder at the National Archives, and then it ends up sort of getting mixed up in a documentary that came out about 10 years ago. So that's actually a misunderstanding. Butler never brought up Prescott Bush's name, but it was because Prescott Bush was too involved with the actual Nazis to be involved with something that was so homegrown as the business plot.
And in terms of why they were
The man with the yellow hat.
Butler, his importance in the early and mid 20th century as a military hero. Would you talk about that as well?
Yeah, so Butler was, he was the Zelig. He's like the Forrest Gump of American imperialism in the early 20th century. He joined the Marines in 1898. He lied about his age. He was 16 years old. And he joined to fight in, the Spanish-American War, the Spanish-Cuban-American War, against Spanish imperialism in Cuba. But from there, he rides a wave of imperial war, and he's everywhere. He's in the Philippines. He invades China twice. He helps seize the land for the Panama Canal. He overthrows governments in Nicaragua, in Haiti. He invades the Dominican Republic, etc. He's also a general during World War I. And so he had this very, very long and renowned resume in the Marine Corps. He was twice the recipient of the Medal of Honor that made him a big star in America. And he had a reputation as being sort of a Marines general. Like he was somebody who had the deep and abiding respect of his enlisted men. And because of that resume of having overthrown a lot of democracies overseas and also having, the loyalty of so many members of the Marine Corps, that for the best as we can tell is why Jerry Maguire and probably his boss, Grayson Murphy, went to Butler to lead their putsch.
And we want to get into this early history because it is fascinating. When you mentioned the Philippines, when you mentioned Cuba and Puerto Rico, people are not really aware, most people, I think, of what the U.S. role was. But just on this plot, in 1934, what did General Motors and J.P. Morgan have to do with this? What was the Liberty League, and how far did this go?
So the reason why we know about the Liberty League's involvement is because Jerry Maguire, who is the representative of this Wall Street firm, tells Butler at this meeting in 1934 that very soon a organization is going to emerge to back the putsch. And he describes them as being sort of the villagers in the opera, that they would sort of be operating behind the scenes. And a couple weeks later, on the front page of the New York Times, this new organization is announced, the Liberty League. And it is started by the DuPonts, Alfred P. Sloan, and all of the people that you just mentioned, and is also directly connected to Maguire, the guy who's recruiting Butler, because his boss, Grayson M.P. Murphy, who is really the linchpin of this thing, is the treasurer of the Liberty League. And what the Liberty League was basically a consortium of extremely wealthy capitalists, industrialists, who hated Franklin Roosevelt. They all had the involvement of two former Democratic presidential candidates, Al Smith and John W. Davis, who were anti-New Deal Democrats. And basically,
if you were born before 1957, this could be the most important video you see today.
Oh, yes, that could be it.
To Pushback, I'm Aaron Nate. Joining me is Andrew Coburn. He is the Washington editor for Harper's Magazine, and his latest book is Spoils of War. Andrew, thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be with you. We are in the midst of this crisis over Ukraine, and one of Democrats' major priorities is pushing through more weapons sales to Ukraine. And I was curious to get your perspective on what role the weapons industry has played in the current crisis. Can you talk about that and how this major issue that Russia has wanting to keep Ukraine out of NATO, how NATO expansion has been a boon for the weapons industry that you spent so much time covering?
Absolutely. Well, actually, I'm continually reminded, I remind myself of a story that's in the book, In Spoils of War, which described a meeting held by the chairman of the House, one of the House military committees, actually it was the Intelligence Committee, a fundraising breakfast a couple of days after Putin, Russia took over Crimea. And there were a group of, it was mostly attended by defense industry lobbyists. And there was a friend of mine who's also a lobbyist who was present. And I saw him later that day, and he was telling me about this meeting. And I said, well, how did it go? What was the mood? And he said, I'd call it borderline euphoric. They were all so excited at this, the incredible possibilities have been opened up, that now, with Russia moving into Crimea, that, obviously, the new Cold War could really ramp up. And so it's proved. I know you've talked a lot about Russiagate and the absurdity of the Trump impeachment, the first Trump impeachment inquiry. And I always like to remind people that the Democrats impeached Trump for holding up a weapons sale. That was his major crime, for holding up a Raytheon weapons sale. And that is, it's a great reflection on the today's political culture that's considered an indictable offense.
Well, someone watching this might say, no, the real offense was that Trump held up the weapons sales and tried to use that to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. And what I spent a lot of time writing on at the time for The Nation magazine was that while it's true that there was evidence that Biden, that Trump and Giuliani mainly Giuliani, were applying pressure on Ukraine to launch some kind of probe of Biden and Hunter Biden's dealings and getting that very lucrative job at Burisma and Biden's role in firing the prosecutor, they had no evidence at all that this pressure campaign by Giuliani was connected to this weapons freeze. And the weapons freeze only happened because after Trump came into office, he was constantly being called a Russian puppet. And so to, I think, help prove that he wasn't, he undid Obama's decision, which was to reject those weapons sales, and he approved them. And finally, when he paused them, he was complaining about how much the U.S. is paying for them, subsidizing these weapons for Ukraine, and he wanted NATO to pay more. And there's plenty of evidence of that, and there's no evidence at all that somehow his pressure campaign about Biden was connected to this weapons freeze. And because of the lack of evidence, that's when Democrats pivoted to relentlessly saying that Trump had put the U.S. in danger because he had frozen these weapons sales. And the famous saying of Schiff,
the United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
I know there were so many inane statements associated with this whole business, but I think that's probably the lead one. I mean, there was a friend of mine who I quote often in the book, who was a great inspiration to me on all this thing, Pierre Spray, who unfortunately passed away last year, and he, who was the clearest-eyed observer or inmate, indeed, for many years of the Pentagon I've ever met. And he was designed a major warplane, right? He designed the A-10, had designed the A-10, created the A-10 or co-created it with someone else, and the F-16, the only two rare instances of weapons that actually work in our armory. But Pierre always used to say that the US government basically has two functions, which are to buy arms at home and sell arms abroad. And that's what it does.
And that's what it does.
So check it out. This is the amazing Spy Scope. It is
Ooh, Spy Scope.
Binocular that we are giving away today for free.
That's what this is, the amazing Spy Scope. It watches you all the time, listens to everything you say.
Super high quality unit, but they're taking up my shelves. That's why I'm shipping them to you.
Really looks to. I don't use that word. I think truth seeker is much more.
Okay, well, forget about that word. But someone who's interested in uncovering the truth about this assassination, the type of person that has that mindset that's interested in uncovering the truth about any historical event. This is one of the best ones.
That's
because there's
what a historian does.
Yes, there's significant evidence, and there's significant evidence that there is a conspiracy. Significance. I mean,
I would say from the beginning there was, yes, where you have a shot from the rear and a shot from the
yes,
front.
well, I was going to get into that. So when you detail so brilliantly in this documentary all of the people that were involved in manipulating evidence, whether it's autopsy photos, whether it's the evidence about the actual shots, where they were fired from, the impact, like where the exit wounds was, all these various people that were involved. How many people knew what had actually happened? Because it seems like there was a concentration of people that was not small. And one of the things that people who like to use the pejorative term conspiracy theorists, they always want to point to people can't keep a secret. Well, the fuck they can't. They had to.
It's a giant maze. It's so confusing.
Yes.
That no one would be believed if they
right.
There's one part. Think of it as departments of this. Departments of this. Somebody pops up and says, "I know this." So he disappears in the maze. It's another piece of information.
Yeah.
There's been no attempt by government to follow up on this at all. They dismissed. They had the HSCA in 1978, right? That came about because of pressure. And a lot of that was classified still and disappeared for a while. We got it out, all that stuff. They decided that there was a probable conspiracy based on the acoustic evidence of the motorcycles. But we don't want to go into that because that's a whole other story.
Acoustic evidence, sound from the recording?
In the front.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
the shots.
The physical evidence of the impact on the body is
more important. Yeah.
Way more important and way more obvious. That first of all, the establishment of the magic bullet was one of the most preposterous things that the United States public has ever accepted.
Okay, so that's enough to titillate and salivate and lubricate this conversation. How many? Just Anthony and me. Who am I kidding? You are. Yeah, of course. Look at this. Here's my redneck. It's like all over me. Like, well, it's really a pink. I'm a commie, It's redneck. You know what a redneck is? Someone who works out in the field and gets a suntan on their neck. That's a redneck. I mean, that's the historical fact, and that's what it is. So it's people who were farmers and so there were people in New Hampshire who were rednecks. There were people in Ohio who were rednecks. There were people in, Boise who were rednecks. If you were working out in the field and you were bending over plants, you were exposing your neck to the dangerous rays of the sun. That's what a redneck is, right? And Virginia is the home of, you heard those three things, corporate interests in war. That's what Virginia is. I mean, it has a major number of corporate heads, Raytheon, Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamic, General Electric. I mean, right here in Roanoke, when I got here, well, actually, it was back in the 70s, right along Electric Road, there was a GE plant, right? And it's GE, and all it said was power. Nothing else, just power, right? So what are they doing there? Power. And so one day I was looking for this restaurant, and it was like between Roanoke and Salem. And I came off Electric Road, and I came up this hill, right? This place is, a city of hills. And so I went up this hill, and it was fall time, and they had cleared this lot out, and we're going to build a house or something. And so I had this amazing view of like almost 360 from above. And what I saw was right down in front of me, a few blocks, there's Electric Road, and there's a GE plant. And I could see the roof, and the roof had these skylights, which I used to, when I was at the UN and when I was at the National Laboratories, and also my Uncle Steve gave me these, and Dr. Kleiman let me peruse his copies of Aviation in Space Weekly. put out by McGraw-Hill, and it's exactly that. Everything that the U.S. military and space industries do that week, they put in that magazine. So all those engineers can see what's going on. And Russia has a similar magazine. England has a similar magazine. France has a similar magazine. Brazil has one. And so does Argentina. And a whole, like England's is Jan's. And and China actually has one. So that's so all their engineers can see what's going on. And all you have to do, you don't need that CIA. All you need is a magazine place. And there was a magazine stand where I met John Lennon. Inside there was the magazine section. It was in this pharmacy. And the pharmacy was in the way back. And it had on this side here, had a big counter, meaning where you get breakfast, lunch, soda fountain, whatever you wanted, all the way. They were kind of open 24/7, so you could go in there anytime and have breakfast or lunch or steak. It was very nice. They have very good food, very yummy, really good coffee, good pastries, and the wall over there was every magazine and newspaper on the planet. It had every country, everything, because around, and this place was almost right across the street from Lincoln Center. When I worked at the Vivian Beaumont Theater, I used to eat there all the time. And then I had a girlfriend who was on 59th, no, she was on 73rd Street. And that was just around the corner, and I would go over there. And because it had this amazing magazine section, and it had Aviation and Space, had Jan's, had the Russian magazine, had every Aviation and Space magazine in this Aviation and Space section. And they had every, like, Council for Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Bilderbergs, you name it. Every one of those guys puts out journals. Anybody had journals. The U.S. Navy put out a great journal called Proceedings, and the Army had one, Air Force had one, Marines had one. So you wanted to know what was going on in the world. I keep telling you guys, you should do your homework. That's what I had to do. Find a place like that has a magazine section. And Barnes & Noble's has a pretty good one. It used to be a lot better. It used to have all those other things I just named. And now they have a few, but not like they used to. And, the guy at the who owned the place, you could go pick up one of those magazines, and he had Aviation and Space, right? He'd have 10 copies, and there'd be one next to it. And that's the one you could go over there and have your breakfast and read, right? Shouldn't mess it up, shouldn't screw it up. But that was the one. And I think he had a little piece of tape on it saying, trial. You can look at this one. And because that magazine was expensive, that was $25, right? And when I worked at those places, because I was on the list, I got free copies of that kind of stuff, right? And once you get on that list, you're still on that list. And if you can, the first time I was on that list was when I was at the UN. That was 1973, and I was there for 2 years and I left. But when I was at Cornell, they had it, but I wanted my own copy, so I sent it off, and I there's the little, they put your name on, that barcode kind of thing, and I still do have copies of Aviation and Space back in the man cave. And another great magazine, it was space, and it was like everything going into space. Aviation and Space was, they had articles on everything, but this other magazine was in super detail. So that's where, when I was at UN, I got that, and that was a really, the U.S. Psychotronic Society. His name was Clarence. He was at the UN, and he was, whatever African nation he was from, I forget. Might have been South Africa, but I don't think so, because this was in the time South Africa was still Hail Hydra. But everyone still is Hail Hydra. You have to realize this, And, like right now with this Ukraine thing, you think that, it's America against Russia, another Cold War, blah, blah. No, Russia and America have always been best buds. Trotsky and Lenin were both in a Canadian jail during the First World War, right? And Russia was England's ally. And Mr. Rothschild and a few other folks go take them out of jail, put them on a English warship, and then tell the Germans, we're going to paint this thing pink. Do not torpedo this, because we're coming over to your neck of the woods, and we're going to drop them off in one of your harbors. I mean, English, man of war, painted pink. I mean, and it was more like a zebra. I mean, this was the excuse. They said that it was psychological warfare. That guy in a submarine looking through a periscope, if he saw a pink ship with all kinds of stripes and things, he would think, I'm hallucinating. I've been underwater too long. And it wouldn't torpedo it. But no, this was a little code to the Germans saying, don't take out this one because it's got stuff that will be important to you. And every war is like that, And there's that little clip of Mr. Snidely Butler, two, not just one, but two distinct, every metal there's known, right? And he wrote a book called War is a Racket, right? Get out of the water, you ain't a fish. Sandra, happy Sunday, Bob. Yep. It's here we are. Get out. Praise Jesus. Anyway, so again, I was talking to Lana a little while ago, and we were talking about all this stuff. And the two things he was questioning me on, why is this always happening? Because I played the thing, war is a racket. It makes a group of people a lot of money. And there's another one I'll play a little later. It shows how, from the Crimean War all the way to today has been the same frigging war, right? And the same Mr. Rothschild and others have just been playing it back and forth and just making millions and destabilizing governments that should stay in power. I mean, when she ran through all of the Spanish-American War, Spain conquered all this stuff, like in 1492 up to like 16 something, right? They had the biggest navy, right? They were going to have a big fight, and whoever they were going to fight, that navy got whacked in a storm. So they had the biggest navy for like 50 years. So they went out there and conquered everything. And, they showed up where guys would run around in grass skirts, and they had guns, so they conquered everything. And they had God on their side. Praise Jesus. And so basically, we wanted to expand the United States. We had conquered all of North America. And so we had the, Mexican Wars, right? And we took California and Texas and all of that. And we had the Indian Wars where we decimated the Indians. And so, about the 1890s, we were looking for, and what better guy to go after than Spain, because they had Cuba, they had all Central and South America, and they had the Pacific, the Philippines, and all those islands around Japan. And so we had big metal boats with big guns, and Spain still only had sail, really wooden boats. I mean, so we went out and we went into Spain's major military port in this neck of the woods along the Atlantic Ocean was in Cuba. And the United States brought one of its warships and just cruised in without any permission or anything. And what could the Spanish do? Nothing. And so, they started pleading with the Americans and putting advertisements, which Mr. Hirsch wouldn't run, that, hey, we don't want a war. Whatever you want, it's okay. Let's negotiate. Let's do diplomacy. And then that ship blew up in the Cuban harbor, the Maine, and 600 sailors died, and we had to, we're being attacked, and just like 9/11, and we went in and obliterated the Spanish Navy and took all their lands, everything in South Central, the Philippines. The Philippines almost became a state, right? And all the Pacific. So everything we conquered in the Spanish-American War was more square miles of land than we had in North America. And we have Papua New Guinea and America this and America that. And those people are American citizens. They can't vote, like in Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, we got that, and Hawaii and all of that. That was all from the Spanish-American War. And then Snidely, if you go back and watch that thing, he was everywhere. Like the guy said, he was the Forrest Gump of American imperialism. And he was a major, and he joined for the Spanish-American War when he was 16, and he lonely private in the Marines, and he went up to two-star general. And so he had the most respect of all fighting men, him and Blackjack Pershing, right? So both those guys, and that's how the Americans won First World War. The French and English and the Germans had the line and just bang, 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 bang. Thousands dying and nothing, they gain an inch or two. So when we went in, and what it was, we had become we were the China of the times. England and Germany were the industrial powers of the world, and they, from the Crimean War, they just kind of fought over who was what. And Germany, like if you ever go to Germany, you will realize, if you spend some time there, that yes, it's one country, but it's 5 different states. And there's the Hungarian, and that there's all kinds of different, and they're like, it's like in the United States. If you go to Texas and Connecticut, boy, there's a big difference. And but they're all Americans, and that's it in Germany. They're really different. I mean, they talk different. They have different, what's it called? Colloquialisms, and they have all kinds. Like in one part of Germany, if you said, "I want 3 beers," you would go like this, right? In another place, they do this. Another place, they do this. And if you're in a bar and someone say, "Hey, I'll have 3 beers," you would know where he was coming. I'll have 3 beers. I'll have 3 beers, right? And in England, if you do this, it means fuck you. Up yours, up yours. Well, this is V for victory. Up yours, up yours. So, what I'm saying is, war is a racket, and has been. Mesopotamia. The guys came from space, came here to get our gold and have war, and so, the only way to go, as I keep saying, is you have to do your personal best in whatever you're doing, and you have to be the character actor, showing by example, right? But not, like these guys. These guys, they're doing
I
okay.
think we did a great service by driving a stake through that heart of that vampire, because it's been around forever.
Well, you detailed in so many different ways, too. You detailed all the various ways that they had tried to establish it. Once they found the wound in the back, they tried to establish...
Well, confuse it. First of all, the magic bullet, there's no chain of custody on it. The FBI lied, and we proved it in the film.
Yes, you did.
Because the times don't match when it was given. So the FBI down and out lied. Mm-hmm. Now, Hoover, of course...
well, who would have thought that they wouldn't do it? So these guys...
wanted to believe that Oswald did
they are
because they put themselves on a straight
putting
track.
a
3 shots.
kind of specific belief, right?
3 shots.
And
one assassin who? Why? What's his motive?
What's his motive?
He was a perfectly reasonable young man. He was in the corridor being yelled.
So where is the other thing I wanted you to see? Well, this guy is always fun. I like this guy.
Don't eat salad before listening to this.
Let me ask you a question. How come?
How come?
I was instantly interested in her theoretical approach, and I thought it would give us an opportunity. Forever. So now we don't really know what to do with this.
It's so true. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that's very well said. And it's not like we.
So I've seen power in its multiplicity of manifestations, and I've certainly come out convinced, for example, that there is nothing more powerful than truth in the word. That's the fundamental source of power. Any sort of power that you would actually dare to want. You know what I mean? It's like, do you really want power? Or is it just, what do you mean by that? You want arbitrary authority over other people? Really, you want that? And
it's interesting. It's interesting that you say this, because I was just rewatching this conversation between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. And Nikki Giovanni, as a young poetess, is grappling with this because the previous generation was the civil rights generation, and she says, "You guys are so moral," and I don't know if I'm interested in morality. She says, the saying, gain the whole world but lose your soul. And
that saying.
And she goes, "Give me the world. I want the world." And then Baldwin essentially asks her, "Are you sure the same question that you're proposing, are you sure you want that kind of power? Do you know what that kind of power does?"
I like that girl's eye. It's just like mine. But she keeps her eyes open. These shields have to be, I only can look through this because if I really open them up, baby, ooh.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to have with me today Ms. Chloe Baldiri. Chloe is the developer of a theory of enchantment that she's using in corporate work and various other venues. I'll tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll jump into the conversation. After spending a year as a Bartley Fellow at the Wall Street Journal, Chloe Baldiri developed the theory of enchantment, an innovative framework for compassionate anti-racism that combines social emotional learning, character development, and interpersonal growth as tools for leadership development in the boardroom and beyond. Chloe has trained around the world, including in South Africa, the Netherlands, Germany, and Israel. Her clients include high school and college students, government agencies, business teams, and many more. She's lectured in universities across America, including Harvard and Georgetown. And her work has been covered in the Atlantic magazine, Psychology Today. Her writings have appeared in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And Chloe spoke a while ago with my daughter, Michaela, and Michaela enjoyed speaking with her, having her as a guest, and suggested that I look Chloe up, and I was instantly interested in her theoretical approach, and I thought it would give us an opportunity to talk about psychological issues and cultural issues, and away we go. So, Chloe, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me. And the first question I have for you, if you don't mind, is why in the world did you agree to talk to me?
This is such a funny question to me, because I've actually been a big fan of yours for a long time. I saw you speak in New York City, or actually in Long Island City, a few years ago, specifically. And I read your book, Maps of Meaning, last year. And I think it's interesting that I decided to read Maps of Meaning during COVID. It was a very particular choice. And I actually saw your lecture series on Maps of Meaning first before reading it. So I have been in conversation with you, in a sense, for a very long time now. And I count it a great honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you today.
Well, that should make you radically unpopular, I would say, all of that. So you read Maps of Meaning during COVID. So how long did that take you?
I think it took me about a month. And then I actually reread my underlined notes before this conversation just to try to prepare myself.
Yeah, well, it's a long read, Maps of Meaning. I put an audio version of it out, and I think that's probably easier for people because the sentences are so long that reading it out loud enabled me to sort of emphasize some parts and de-emphasize others, and I think that was a good hint as to the underlying meaning. But okay, so let's talk about what you're doing first. What is it that you're doing as far as you're concerned? And with regards to, we'll focus on the anti-racism issue, I guess. What is it that you think you're doing?
Sure. So on a very simple level, I have a startup called Theory of Enchantment, and we do anti-racism work. And the way we understand the act of anti-racism is psychologically rooted. And I like to say that we take a page out of the sages of the civil rights movement. So Dr. King, James Baldwin, individuals like that. Our understanding of supremacist ways of thinking is psychological. So the idea is that supremacist ways of thinking occur when a human being experiences some kind of insecurity, deep insecurity within themselves. It could be a feeling of a loss of identity, lack of belonging, some kind of self-contempt for whatever reason, and then they project that feeling onto the other that looks different from them in order to feel better about themselves as a defensive mechanism. And so Theory of Enchantment.
Okay, well, sorry, I don't want to, go ahead, continue with that.
So Theory of Enchantment says that if that is the case, if that is how this works as human beings, then we have to engage in a series of practices to be in right relationship with ourselves, the totality of ourselves, the complexity of ourselves, so that we become less likely to overcompensate, less likely to project in the first place. So that's essentially what the Theory of Enchantment is all about.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple of questions about that. So I put together some topics for a potential discussion a while back. They're kind of relevant to our discussion. So I thought I might address some of the more progressive claims in this discussion. And so here are the claims or questions. Are all white people racist? Well, what's the answer to that? Yes and no, I think. Is the West a white supremacist society? Yes and no. Is the U.S. structurally racist? Yes and no. Is gender fluid? Yes and no. Are all men sexist? Yes and no. And I believe the yes and no answers to both of those. And so let's start with this racism issue. So one of the things I kind of outlined in Maps of Meaning, I think, is that there are two sources of virulent racism. And one is universal, as far as I can tell, looking at the anthropological literature. So one of the things you see that's characteristic of human societies, regardless of their size and location, is that there's a strong proclivity for the members of those societies to regard those within the society as human. This is particularly true of you can particularly see this in isolated tribes, as human, and all other humans that aren't in the tribal group as not human. And that's really, it seems really deeply rooted. And so you even see it in chimpanzees, our closest biological relatives. So the chimps arrange themselves so that they can function within their own troop, let's say, without tearing each other into pieces, except on occasion. But chimps will send raiding parties of males around the boundaries, essentially. And if they encounter non-chimp chimps, foreigners, let's say, even if they were once part of that troop and had moved, if they outnumber them, they'll often tear them to pieces. And that was discovered in the 1970s, and it was a major discovery because it showed how deeply rooted this in-group, out-group.
In-group, out-group. In this, we need to be brothers and sisters, all our relations, no matter what species. Well, we're not going to be here that long. No, wait a minute. Made some nice yummy soup. Onions, peas, mushrooms, cabbage. I don't know what the vegetable is, but it's good. and cumin and curry and oregano. So anyway, you know, I'm up here. Got a lot of time to think. And, you know, I'm really seeing that this reminds me of Germany, 1933. Germany was the most democratic country, Weimar Republic in Europe. And they had, and they were really shackled after World War I. Basically, the Americans cheated. Once they came in the war, because they, like I said, they were this big industrial might. They were the China of the time. They had all these resources, they had all this technology that they had. It was homegrown, Yankee ingenuity, and of course they stole it from England. And we gave it to them, just like we gave all the technology to China. They did not have an electronics industry. When the Challenger blew up, we had plenty of other ways to put satellites in space. But we allowed the Chinese to launch our spy satellites, right? And the Nazis in South Africa had a very, very, I mean, next to us, that company in South Africa put more things into orbit than we did, more than Russia did. No one even knows about it. Well, Nazis. And Werner went there a lot. So did Dorn. And those were the guys who were running our military missile department. So, it's about money. It's about power. Right? So I was telling you about how Virginia is the seat of the military-industrial complex. First, CIA is right here. So is the NSA. So is the Pentagon. So is every military-industrial company right here in Virginia. They may have other things, but they have their who makes the decisions right here in Virginia. We have a ton of underground, what are known as DUMBs, deep underground military bases, running from D.C. all the way to Colorado. Right? And there's a thing called COG, Center Organizational Government, or continuation of government, or basically it was put together in 1947 when we went from the War Department to the Defense Department. And once we passed the National Security Act, America became Hail Hydra. And it's all very, like I said, it's not really hidden. Now, they split everything all up. You can't really, unless you were a guy like me who looks at things, reads things, thinks about things, work for some of these people once in a while. You're not going to, and because you're so distracted. You want to know what lipstick to wear. What eyeliner you have. If you look like me, you would be horrified. Oh my God, I need plastic surgery. I need hair implants. You forget that crap. You know why guys go bald? It's because when their body starts to whack out on testosterone, different parts, when your boys need more of it, it sucks it out of other parts. Like, you don't need. And as you get older, that's where you jerk off more because your boys keep sucking the testosterone down to the nuts, and you go nuts about it, right? So, but no. Oh, so I was driving around this neighborhood, and I looked down at the GE plant and it had these skylights. What those skylights are is so that the Russians, whenever you see those skylights, you know there is a really heavy-duty military thing going on in there because with the START II treaty, because both the United States had spy satellites in space, could look down, and so they, to make sure that Russia and the United States knew what the other guy was doing, they would put these skylights so they could look down and see them making bombs. So there's this GE factory, and it has super security. I mean, it had a double ringed barbed wire fence, one about 50 feet away from the plant, and then another one about 50 feet away from that. And then there was one around the parking lot, and then one around the whole thing. And you had to go through a gate where they looked at your ID, right? And it was a double gate, meaning you came in, this gate was closed, this one would open, there'd be the little blockhouse. He would say, let's see your ID. If, it didn't get that, there were guys there with guns, and that other gate wouldn't open. So it was, and then you were just in the parking lot. Then you had to get through another gate, and then another gate, and then the thing around the building. So they weren't just making toaster ovens in there, So I said, oh, look at that. And then because I was on top of this, I turned around and I see another building like over there in Salem. And it has the same kind of security fences and skylights. I go, oh, look at that. And then over there, I couldn't see the roof of that building because of the angle of the hill and stuff, but I could see. So within me being in this one little neighborhood, there were 3 super duper secure places that, that would be ground zero. That'd be a place that, Russia would definitely hit it with a MIRV, right? So that's good. If you're going to live through that, you might as well want to be right in a place that'll be vaporized within seconds. So, but all those things are gone, and they're everywhere. In Asheville, there are a number of those places, and pretty much every place I've ever lived, there was something of that nature within 10 miles. The only place that I've done this on purpose. The only place that I've ever lived that really, at least in America, that doesn't have something like that within 10 miles of it is the Deep Green. Now, I live in this Sawtooth Mountain place, so I'm sure there's stuff underneath. Way over in the other county, there is a gravel pit, right? And big deep hole in the ground, big conveyor belts and machines taking gravel and smashing it up into little bits to put on roads. And there's a gigantic cave that when you drive by this place, you can see right in there, right? And half of it is kind of, covered, not by a mountain, but by concrete or whatever they use to cover it, right? And then there's a kind of opening that you can't see which way, it's an opening, but you don't see the road or who's going in there or whatever, right? So I asked a few people who worked at that place. I said, so what is that cave? Oh, that's been here forever. When I was a kid, we would go, and this guy was an old guy. Like when he was a kid, it was like just after World War One. He said, when I was a kid, we used to go up there. And, it was really deep. And we would go we'd camp out there. We'd do all kinds of stuff. And you could never find the end of it. It was really big, and there was lots of water in there, and then Second War came, and I was drafted, and when I came back, and I went for a hike, it was like totally secured by the military. And then in 1960, a big gravel company bought it and put a gigantic fence around, 500 acres, and basically obscured it completely because it no longer was, the gravel pit was in the way. They dug a big thing, and the fence was there, and can only see it on this one ride, and you're going by, right? And unless you really know where to look, it says, "So that's the gravel pit." Big sign saying gravel, blah blah. And so there's all kinds of stuff underground. Also, by the lake, about 30 miles from my house, but maybe 15 by the way the bird flies. There's this lake, and it's a TVA lake, so there's the dam. And when they built it, they flooded out a whole town called Butler. And to make up for it, they made a couple of camping sites around the lake. Very nice. I really enjoy them, and I've camped on them. And they have a boat ramp, and they have a beach. They wouldn't want to really swim in that beach because Elizabethton dumps, Elizabethton is a city of maybe 20,000, and they dump raw sewage into that lake. And that raw sewage is like, maybe 500 feet from where the beach is. So I never quite. And everyone goes there and packs in. I mean, it's a small little beach. They're like sardines, and they have this little fence in the lake, and it goes down to the ground. So the crap can only go up against the fence. You wouldn't want to be swimming in the water and get a log in the mouth, right? So they have this boom around the beach, and fence goes down into the ground, and so and if you look at it, it's very, very fine. It's not like big. It's not like a chain link fence. It's like that kind of fence, right? And all kinds of gook is up against it, and the smell is. But there's every hot weekend there's 300-400 people there squished in, and they can't swim. They just stand in the water. It's like really a biological experiment. And down the road from that, by 2 miles, is the boat landing. Very nice boat landing. Big parking lot. I'm like about 100 people can put their boat in and park their trailer and their car very nicely. And that's very nice, right? And they also have boat ramps all over that lake, not just that one. They have about 10. So that's the one that like people from out of state who are staying in a hotel or whatever, and because this lake has amazing fish because they flooded a whole mountain range. So all kinds of inlets and swirly things. And if you take the coast of all of that, it's 1,200 miles. Right? There's two big chunks of the lake that people think that's the lake, but it's not. Because really most of the lake is where they flooded in all these Sawtooth Mountains. Anyway, across from the big, boat ramp is this thing. The Forest Service came and cleared out the whole friggin' neck of, like maybe 100 acres, and it was right at the base of this mountain, and then they cleared out about 100 acres, and right up to the road, and then there's the lake, right? So you see it. Meaning, if you're going from, one side of the lake to the other, to like Elizabethton, you see it. If you go from the Butler to there, you see it. And so they put this big, cleared it all out, leveled it all, put big fence around it, and they then covered that fence with material. So you couldn't, and the fence was maybe 10 foot high and had barbed wire going like this. And a big rolling gate, right? And during the work days, and it was big. I mean, it was like two things that were 30 feet and they rolled together. So the gate, the space was about 60 feet because they brought in and out big, gigantic trucks, right? And anyway, for at least 7 years, they had that trucks going in and out, doing all kinds of stuff, but you can never really see it. The gate would open, truck would drive through, gate close, and the thing's 10 feet up. Unless you were 10 feet looking down, you couldn't see it. Anyway, after 6 years, you could see there was a structure that was, maybe 40 feet high. So, and another 3-4 years went by, and then they didn't take down the fence, but they took off the coverings. And all it was like a metal garage, a metal, it was about 40 feet high, about, 100 feet long, 100 feet deep. So 100 by 100 by 40 feet high, right? Or bigger. I never went out there with a tape measure. And, but a pretty big, but just a garage, big roll, garage door, and that's it. And there'd be a few Forest Service cars parked out once in a while. That was it. Then, at the same time, a few years after this thing was started, the utility company, because we were really rural, so we just would have a single phase high voltage line for houses, right? But then they put 3-phase all the way around, right? And primary and secondary, meaning about 20,000 volt 3-phase line and about 100,000 volt 3-phase line, right? So that's very indicative, as I, as a demographer, would say, okay, so they are preparing to develop this area really big time, which they're doing right now, right? And that was about 15 years ago. And to do that, we have from that dam and the grid, there is a 1,000,000 volt way high big tower, and they put one right all around the lake, kind of, and then it branches off. One goes to Boone and one goes over to Kingport. And they don't go on the other side of the lake because that whole side of the lake is National Forest, Cherokee National Forest. So anyway, right next to, like on that 100-acre thingamajig, to service that 3-phase line that's going to where they're going to develop, they put a big, take from that 1,000,000 volts, transmission distribution center. And those are the things I used to build. And they put it right next to the Forest Service building, right? And so, there's big transformers, and that 3-phase primary, secondary is right there coming out of that. But because I know what to look for, there are some big lines going underground right there where the Forest Service road is. So they took them 9 years just to build a stinky little metal garage. And there's enough electricity going down underground for maybe 500,000 people. There is something underneath that lake and underneath those mountains for sure. So, there's stuff like that everywhere. And it all emanates from DC and the main lines all go to Colorado, to Denver. And that is where the backup capital, that's where COG is, continuation of government. I think that's what COG stands for. And so there's all kinds of stuff like that. And every country, England has all that kind of stuff under London, right? So, and they got stuff all over the place too. So you got to realize, and there are tunnels that go from America to London to Vatican to Moscow. They don't fly airplanes. They take these, Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is doing this. He has a company. He bought all of this stuff from the Air Force that the Air Force used to make all these tunnels back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he bought all, he's taken that over because they don't want that technology in the hands of the government, because with the FOIA report, you can find out what they're doing. They'll give you a redacted document, but they'll at least give you a document, which you'll know will give you a heads up that they're doing something. But if the thing's owned by a private corporation, so all of the stuff that's out in space, all the time travel, all of the faster, the beaming me up, Scotty, why we didn't have to spend or send people to the moon by a Saturn V was that we can beam them from these bases straight to the moon and then straight to Mars and then straight out into this, universe, until we get to Alpha Centauri in less than 2 seconds, So don't believe a word I say. Go just scratch around a little bit and you'll find something interesting. I'm sure you will. Okay. There's only one left. 4 of you were here, at least, if not more. What time's it now? It's 4:57. I'm going to charge my batteries up a little bit. So I want you guys to watch what this was, and I will be back 4:55. So I'll be here by 7:30. Easy, right? Maybe sometime between 7 and 7:30, I'll come back. And let's have a real conversation on what's going on and what you want to do and how, like we can't, Greta, what's her name? Who's that little girl? Oh, I'm so sad. They're killing the planet. Oh, I'm so mad. Ooh. Well, if you don't realize that she is just a freaking plant, she, if she was real, you would never hear about her, right? You hear about somebody, So hey buddy, if you're there, come on, join the club. And Dragon 2. I love you. I would never bop you off. Either, if you think any of you think I diss you, it's all in your head. Because I diss everybody, even myself. I love. All I am is here to serve love's co-creation. So I laid the platform for what I'm going to talk about later, and I'll tell stories about it. Spooky. This tonight's show was spooky stories. Okay. Talk to you later. Boo, 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 boo.